Whenever there's a thunderstorm, it's just God bowling with Jesus, White.
The little girl asks her mommy as the rain pelts the window and thunder claps in the distance. Jellapisi's mother had told her not to teach her daughter things that weren't true, and this is exactly why. When you tell kids things that aren't real, or when you fudge the truth just a little bit, they grow up with a warped view of the world, convinced vagina is a dirty word and that a mystical man in the sky created the world in 7 days. Jellapisi could see now what her mother had meant happening right before her very eyes. Here they are, boarding up their house, preparing for an oncoming hurricane tornado double whammy, and her daughter is asking about God and Jesus' bowling game. No, honey, God isn't real. Now hand me more nails, Jellapisi barks at her daughter. Little Lilititia, having her world shattered in only 3 words, God isn't real, shrieks in horror, now suddenly terrified of thunderstorms and death. Jellapisi backhands Lilititia and shakes her by the shoulders. You listen here and you listen good, sister. Now you're about to die if you don't get your act together and help your family. Cut the shit. She releases her daughter and returns to work. Lilititia scans the room. Her dad, Paul, boards up their front door with OSB and 2x4s they'd bought earlier from the Menards. Barry, Paul's son from another marriage, gathers up cherished family items and valuables and loads them down into the storm cellar. Don't just stand there, Lily! Go get the damn dog or something! Her mother snaps at her, taking a momentary break from boarding up the kitchen windows. Lilititia puts on a jacket and heads for the back door. She peers through the peephole and sees Dozer chained to a tree far in the backyard. Technically her grandmother's ex-boyfriend's dog, Dozer had always been chained to that tree. It's a shame to admit, but Lilititia hadn't even questioned it until this day. Perhaps her grandmother feels better knowing that the dog is being mistreated in this way, as her ex-boyfriend had disappeared in the night without a word. Either way, the dog didn't deserve to be sucked up into what the meteorologists were calling the world's first megastorm disaster. Lilititia pulls the hood of her coat up and heads outside. The screen door rips off instantly, and Lilititia screams as it flies across the yard and smashes against their wooden privacy fence. Lily braces herself against the wind and treks back to Dozer. The poor, whining and scared Rottweiler pleads with Lily as she unhooks him from the tree for the first time in, well, ever, as far as she knew. The dog bolts toward the house and paws at the back door, whining. Lily races across the yard as the wind howls and rain soaks her face. Dozer turns toward Lily and barks frantically before clawing more and more at the door. Lily turns to see a massive tornado touch down behind her, nipping at her heels. She screams as she picks up her speed. Lily tries to open the door, but the wind is too strong. As her fingertips graze the doorknob, she is slowly sucked into the tornado's pull as it draws closer and closer. Dozer tries to grab Lilititia's pant leg, but he too is slowly pulled into the tornado's midst. Lily screams for her mother, but she's sure that her family is already hiding in the storm cellar. Probably had been since the second she'd stepped outside. Lily grabs onto Dozer as the two are lifted from the ground and sucked up hundreds and hundreds and thousands of feet into the air by the vicious tornado. Swirling and twirling, the pair cling onto each other as they spin with the tornado as it tears through town. With every building, tree, and person they rip through, more and more debris joins the tornado and casually passes by Lily and Dozer. Though there is much destruction below them, in the eye of the storm it is much more relaxed. The wind is nice, the spinning sorta like a ride, and the sights are incredible. Not only are they thousands of feet in the air, but they're also watching cool things float by every few seconds. Whole cows, dirty magazines, dirt bikes, halved cows, the mailman Peter, an assortment of flowers, and the disembodied heads of their neighbors. Lilititia is absolutely entranced as she circles and circles in the tornado. Dozer enjoys his time as well, trying to catch passing obstructions and playing for the first time Lily could ever recall.
I wish we could be like this forever,
Lily wishes under her breath. There isn't a shooting star or anything, but Lily can just feel that this is going to be her life forever now. At only 4 years old, she is sure that she will fly high within this tornado and enjoy her freedom with her dog. But God has other plans. Or maybe it isn't God. Lilititia isn't sure. She'd been told he existed up until about 20 minutes ago, so it's hard to refocus your beliefs in that amount of time. Her time in the tornado was pleasant, but as Hurricane Westminster hits land, it violently rips and tears through the landscape, and its 175-mile-per-hour winds come right up and crash into the already bustling and destructive tornado. The warm Gulf winds of the hurricane serve as an accelerant for both the speed of the tornado's revolutions and its path across the city. Now speeding at over 175 miles per hour and rotating that fast and quicker with every second, Lilititia isn't having much fun anymore, and neither is Dozer, who was knocked out by a passing tree limb and now lies unconscious in Lily's arms. Screaming and fearing for their lives, Lilititia clings to Dozer as long as she can until the inertia from the violent spinning rips the dog from her arms and sends them both flying in opposite directions. Lilititia tries to keep an eye on Dozer as she soars further and further away from him in the tornado, but she quickly collides with an entire house and careens right through the window, coming to a stop against the home's stairwell banister. Struggling to breathe from her collision, Lilititia slowly crawls her way across the floor of the detached home and pries open the front door. A huge gust of wind presses into the newly opened door and sends her flying back, smashing through a window over the kitchen sink and back out into the open air of the tornado's eye. Flailing about for anything to give her stability, the little girl is grabbed by a fellow citizen who has also been sucked up. "Don't worry! I've got you!" the man yells over the cacophony. Lilititia has never seen him before, and her mom had taught her not to speak to or trust strangers, but she feels like a natural disaster like this is reason enough to break the rules. Sure, the videos they'd shown her in kindergarten were explicit that there are absolutely no circumstances in which a young child should speak to a stranger, but Lily is willing to guess that they hadn't thought of any kids getting sucked up into a mega-tornado backed by a hurricane without their parents present. Lily burrows her head into the man's armpit as he gracefully navigates his way through the tornado. Gliding almost like a flying squirrel, the man successfully navigates all of the debris and does so with ease. Lily finds comfort in his arms and hopes that her trust isn't misplaced. The man guides them toward a nearby car that is circling and opens the door. He carefully puts Lilititia inside and attempts to climb in after her, but a stop sign hurtling at 225 miles per hour sails through him, slicing him in half at the waist. Lilititia shrieks in horror as the top half of the man screams and begs her to kill him. She reaches out and pushes on his face and tries to get his body to fall out, but he won't budge. Despite his constant screams of agony and his endless pleas for Lily to end his life, she can't get him to budge. She continues to beat him in the face and scream until it's obvious to her that he isn't going anywhere. She opens the other door and jumps back out into the tornado. The man had made gliding through the tornado seem so easy, but Lily was having a lot of a harder time. She raises her arms out to the side like he had done and tries to use her head to steer. After a few tries, she does start to get the hang of it. Diving up and down, curling around, and performing aerial tricks, Lilititia has the time of her life dancing through the tornado's wind.
"I want to be a bird in this tornado forever, God,"
she screams aloud, flapping her arms and doing a backflip. As she turns upside down, she notices Dozer flailing and overturning endlessly a few hundred feet below in a deeper, narrower part of the tornado. It looks really rough and violent down there. If this higher, more open part of the storm is a peaceful Bob Ross Creek, then the part of the storm that Dozer was toiling through is the Whitewater Rapids. Lilititia, at only 4 years old, loves animals with all of her heart, more than anything in this world. Her own dogs, Fog, Pete, and Lucy, are the joy of her existence. She doesn't know why she never paid any attention to Dozer chained to that tree in the back of her yard. She wants to go down there now and save him, but she doesn't want to risk her life more than she has to. She notices a dead possum flying nearby and grabs it. With all her might, she flings it down toward Dozer, and the storm instantly sucks it in and rips it apart. If Lily doesn't grab Dozer, he too will be ripped apart, but if she goes down there, won't she too? Lily doesn't question it for a second. Bowing her head and flying down like a skydiver would, she shoots 300 feet like a rocket and circles a good 15 feet above her dog. He's still wearing the chain from the tree, and Lily grabs at it over and over again in vain. It simply isn't long enough. She will have to get closer. She slowly edges closer to the dog and the cacophonous and deadly epicenter, and manages to loop the last link of Dozer's chain with her pinky finger. Yes! She celebrates prematurely, amazed by her abilities. Tethering herself to Dozer's spinning and flailing chaotic body was a mistake. Lilititia gets tangled up in the long metal chain and falls and twirls with Dozer ever closer to the violent center of the storm. Just as they circle the rim of death, the halved man from earlier sacrifices himself by somehow navigating the car down to them, getting Lily and Dozer in and himself back out, all before being ripped apart by the wind. The car continues falling through the eye of the storm and actually ends up breaking up the deadly tornado, sending thousands and thousands of pounds of debris falling all around the car. Miraculously, Lily and Dozer survived in the car, no debris happening to fall on them in the aftermath of the tornado. They were rescued some 35 hours later as the rescue crews continued to clean up the wreckage. Lily and Dozer were picked up from the local hospital and Humane Society, respectively, by Lily's grandmother. Her grandmother, Lilititia, told her bluntly that her family had been killed and her home destroyed by the tornado-hurricane hybrid, and that she was going to be living with her from now on. Dementia is a crazy disease, and no one would ever wish it on their worst enemy, but Lilititia used it to her advantage. Lilititia no longer remembered Dozer or her ex-boyfriend Lee. All she knew was that the dog meant a lot to her only surviving family member. If the Horchachuchi name was to live on, Lilititia Horchachuchi would have to keep Lilititia happy. And if that meant living with a big Rottweiler, then so be it. No longer tied to a tree in the backyard, Dozer enjoyed running on the beach with Lilititia. When he passed away of old age, Lilititia got a tattoo of him on her arm. It depicted a dog in a tornado, and underneath it said Dozer. It was pretty basic, but most tattoos are. At least it had a personal meaning. Fuck off anyway. It's her money. I mean, she could do whatever she wants with it. Who the hell are you to judge?
You people don't do anything.
The dog, Bort's